Okay, hello everybody. How are you? Hello, dear colleagues. We are excited to welcome you, right, colleagues from different parts of the province of Buenos Aires who are watching and listening to us in this live streaming on YouTube. We are delighted to have you here, right, in this streaming session, which, as you know, is part of our virtual professional development course, la enseñanza situada del inglés desde la pedagogía del postmétodo, offered by the Dirección de Formación Docente Permanente de la Provincia de Buenos Aires. As you know, one of the modules, right, within this course is about exploratory action research. Hence, the title of this meeting, Teachers as Agents of Change, Exploratory Action Research in Latin American Context. So, dear colleagues, thank you for being here. We know you are dedicating valuable time and effort to participating in our course. We want you to know that your commitment is truly appreciated and that we are excited to have you here and ready to learn together. First, I'd like to introduce to you the team of professionals, the team of tutors who form the course, right, who are accompanying you in this course. So Claudia Tilatti, Paul Labandeira, Oscar Marino, right, and me. Hi, people. How are you?
Fine.
Okay, we are all formadores de formadores, ¿sí? De diferentes regiones de la provincia de Buenos Aires. Claudia works in región 11. Paul works in región 3 y 8. And Oscar and me, we work in región 10. Okay? Okay, everybody comfortable? Yes? Today, we are thrilled to have a specialist, right, in the field of exploratory action research, especially in the teaching of English as a foreign language. And we want to give a warm welcome to Dr. Paula Rebolledo. Hello, Paula. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you? Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure, right? I guess that you can all see on the banner, right, on the screens, Paula's biodata. And you can read her biodata, right? She's a teacher educator who has taught primary, secondary, undergraduate, and postgraduate levels. She has given workshops and seminars and plenary talks worldwide. And her expertise lies in teacher education, professional development, and teacher research. And she leads initiatives that aim to empower teachers with research skills. That's why we are all here together. And we are more than confident that Paula's participation will be extremely beneficial and enriching for our teaching practices. So thank you, Paula.
I hope. I can help.
We're sure about that. So thank you, Paula. Thank you for being here. We know that you have a very tight schedule and that you have accommodated it to be present here today, right? So without further ado, let's begin right with this exciting section and explore together new perspectives and tools to enhance our work as educators. As you can imagine, we have tons of questions for Paula. So we've kind of grouped them, clustered them in 4 topics or 4 sessions, right? First, we are going to ask Paula about the definition of exploratory action research, what it is and what it isn't, right? Then we would like Paula to tell us something about her own experiences as teacher educator, to talk a little bit about the future of exploratory action research. And at the end, we would ask her for some suggestions and recommendations that she can give us as teachers of English working in Latin American contexts. So, shall we start? I would like to tell you, right, that there is the chat box, or the chat box is available for you to write questions there. We would be gathering those questions and then asking them to Paula, all right? So, first question, right? Let's see. Paula, you've been a pioneer, right, and a leader together with Richard Smith, right, in promoting exploratory action research, which is this approach to teacher research for professional development. So how do you define exploratory action research? What are its main features? How is exploratory action research different from other forms of action research or classroom inquiry? And we would also want to know about the benefits, right, of exploring before taking action. Okay?
Okay, thank you. I'm going to try to remember to mention everything. If not, you remind me.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so there, you can, if you look at the handbook for action, for exploratory action research, you had find a definition there. You can find definition in other documents. But if I can just explain what it means to me after working with teachers and also going back to the origins of the approach, it is an approach to teacher research, which we perceive as introductory, kind of a gradual way to start introducing teachers into the whole idea of the process of teacher research. Because we see it as introductory because we see like a kind of a stepping stone into trying different types of research to get into an understanding of what it is. One of the key elements of this approach is that we try to make it very jargon-free. So a lot of terminology that is commonly used in research, it's not that we avoid it, but we don't think it's useful. So we have managed to introduce teachers to teacher research without needing to use a very academic terminology. So that's one part of it. At the heart of this are teachers that we would call teachers that work in difficult circumstances. Therefore, when we started thinking about this approach, we had in mind teachers that had very little time, that work with a lot of students in the classroom, that have very little possibilities of collecting big amounts of data, and they need strategies to go along the process that are very manageable, that are very friendly to the practices that they usually use. So we try to make sure that the kind of things that they do in the research process are very, can be used in their everyday teaching practice. So that is also at the heart of it. And probably the most, the kind of the element that makes it stand out or make it be different from others is the fact that we propose an initial exploration phase before jumping into the action part of it. Now, the reason for this difference comes from this particular element comes from Richard Smith. He had the vision that there sometimes when teachers start doing teacher research, they start immediately with an idea of wanting to change something without really understanding what was at the heart of the situation. And interestingly, this is something that I had noticed as well in previous research that I had carried out. So the idea of this is that instead of teachers going immediately into trying to solve a problem, which is usually what happens in action research, even though there is a reflection element going on, it's kind of very fast, okay, let's reflect and then immediately let's try to solve it and then let's see what happens. we wanted that to really delay that process. And a lot of what goes on, it's mainly at the core of everything, it happens during the exploration phase. In fact, we advise teachers not to panic or not to feel anxious if they do not get to the action part. Just the understanding of what happens in the classroom is what we consider to be highly valuable. And based on that experience, they can take opportunities later to maybe not change anything because things already improved, maybe change something, or maybe continue doing something based on what they found. Also, the fact that action research is an implementation of something, not necessarily so, but gives teachers the idea that there is a problem that needs to be solved. So the origin needs necessarily to be a problem. In our approach, we invite them to think about even successful stories, to think about things that work, that went well, and to explore why those things went well. And maybe features of that successful story could be expanded on and used in other teaching situations. Also puzzles, things that they don't know, they don't understand. We have examples of that in the book and in the many stories that we have edited. So there's always the invitation of not seeing only the problem as a possible origin. We understand why teachers would choose problems, of course, but we don't see necessarily that as being the original driver for starting. I think I cover that pretty much what it is.
Yes,
what are
perfectly.
Features and
what
how
I would like to focus is on the idea of this exploration stage, the importance of this exploration stage, and also from what I understood is the importance of of collaboration among teachers in this exploration stage. This exchange of ideas and trying to focus on an issue that could be positive or negative.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The exploration phase, we have, after trying it, we realize that it's so important in the approach because this is where all the aha moments happen. Mm-hmm. This is when teachers finally realize here is at the core of the problem, not what I originally thought. And this is what usually the kind of things that teachers say are things such as my students are not speaking, they don't enjoy speaking, for example, speaking activities, or they just don't like English. And after gathering data and collecting information, some of the reflection is it's not that they didn't like English, it's just or they don't like speaking, is that I haven't given them enough tools or enough language support for them able to communicate effectively. Therefore, I've just realized now that I should do that before they feel ready to start using the language productively. And even that realization, it's so important that whether they attempt something immediately or not, it's not as important. Just the realization of that immediately means that they're going to start shifting their teaching into trying to do things differently, providing more support. So all the understanding of my teaching happens then. And the value of that is that they see it for themselves. It's not somebody coming into their classroom and telling you what you did wrong. It has a lot of power because you realized by yourself what was at the core of the problem or at the core of this particular situation. So the fact that you are the one discovering it, that is why it's so impactful. That process, of course, can lead into an action plan later on. But as I said before, whether it does or not, just the understanding of the situation, creates a lot of reflection, a lot of awareness raising about things that are happening in my classroom that I didn't realize before.
Okay, perfect.
Sorry, you mentioned something about supporting, teachers supporting each other. It's interesting, but when we start, every time we are working with teachers about the initial stages of this process, there is a lot of conversations between them about what could be a potential topic that I'm going to start discovering. And that initial conversation with another colleague is quite useful because in that conversation, there is all this dialogue in which you start realizing that there were things that you didn't know really, but you were taking for granted. And by having a colleague asking you questions that you hadn't thought about, it's start helping this reflection cycle. Then throughout the process, it's great to have a critical friend that helps you also with your data collection tools, because it's difficult enough to try to design something from scratch. If you have somebody that can give you feedback, see it with another pair of fresh eyes, something that you have been looking out for a long time, it also helps. We didn't really fully understand the power of a colleague until we decided to promote peer mentors to act as mentors of teachers. At the beginning, the very first cohort, there were academics, teachers at university that were acting as mentors. Then the second cohort, we introduced teachers that have had the experience before helping colleagues, and that changed everything. The fact that they had been through the experiences, the fact that they are in the classroom on a regular basis, the fact that they are both going through the same kind of reflection process is what makes this dialogue so crucial for the awareness raising that develops later.
Okay, perfect. And everything's very clear, isn't it? Okay, Paul, would you like to pitch in? Would you like to ask some questions, right?
My pleasure. My pleasure.
We have.
Thanks, Anna. Well, hello, Paula. It's a real pleasure to have you here with us. It's a well-known fact that you've been involved in the British Council Champion Teachers Program in Chile, right? And also other countries. And that in that position, you have helped teachers engage in the EAR, right? In exploratory action research. In several publications and several presentations, you have also showcased the outcomes and insights of EAR projects. Having achieved all that, I'm pretty sure you must have witnessed the changes that exploratory action research can bring to teachers' practice, confidence, and agency. Also, you have co-founded RESOLVE, which is the network of Chilean researchers in EOT, and you have always promoted teacher research as a way of professional development. But you have also crossed the borders and reached to teachers from an amazing amount of countries, going from Latin American countries like Chile, Mexico, Colombia, to those countries that everybody finds difficult to pronounce, like Azerbaijan, Georgia, Ukraine, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Nigeria, Ethiopia. Where have you not been, my dear Paula? And you have even reached Thailand, where exploratory action research has been also implemented in various ways. So, having had such a vast experience, what would you say were the main challenges and opportunities that you faced in these contexts?
Okay, in terms of, I want to leave the positive for the end. So let's start with the challenges. The challenges when I am working with teachers and trying to share about exploratory action research is that first, which is something that we try to start talking about very early on, is this myth that research is very academic, is very difficult to do, that you need a lot of time, that you need to study a lot, that you need to read everything. And so all these myths around research that make it scary. And something that I usually say a lot, this is kind of it's kind of a joke that I made to friends, with friends all the time. When I'm going to give a presentation, I usually think, well, if I'm lucky, I'm going to have 2 people, because research is not sexy. So when I am talking with teachers about research, I also understand, and I try to disclose the conversation about, I know that there are all these myths around it. I know it may not be sexy. I know you think it's not going to help you in your teaching practice, but it will. So first, we need to try to demystify research a little bit. So that's one thing. And then another common thing that I've becoming more and more aware of is this difficulty, especially when teachers are in the process, is this difficulty of having absolute autonomy and agency to choose a topic and then from that data make sense of it. Unfortunately, in many countries, and this is a thing that I've seen broadly, for a number of reasons, cultural reasons, we have been not giving teachers the agency to think for themselves. We are kind of telling them what to do all the time. I include myself, I'm sure I've done this. And so the problem is that when I ask them to look at the data and try to figure out what the data is telling them, they just want to be told. But they want to be told because they haven't been given many opportunities.
Recipe.
Yeah, they haven't been given really the opportunity to try out things for themselves or think for themselves. And then if they are also concerned that you're going to tell them that something is wrong when actually you would like them to be critical and to problematize what they found. It's giving them permission to make mistakes, giving them permission to try out different things, to think for themselves and to problematize practice without anybody telling them, no, this is the way you should do it. I have found many examples like that, but it's usually the need to kind of being told. Just to give you an example, it's very common that when I ask teachers to design an observation form for them to collect data from an observation, they usually have the question, do you think my class was effective or something, to ask to the observer. And then I need to explain, it sounds rude, but it's true. We don't care what the observer thinks of your class. We want the observer to collect data for you, and we care what you think of your class. You determine whether that data is indicating that was effective. But time and time again, that question comes in an observation format, which is, again, telling this need of, I need somebody to tell me what I'm doing right or wrong. So I think that's a challenge. The common challenge that we have discussed many times, and is in all the literature of this, is lack of support, lack of support from the school, from institutions. And then if I need to go back to teachers themselves, is for them, sometimes it's lack of understanding of that, how research can be effective for me and for my practice. Sometimes they would do it because it's a course and it's kind of part of a diploma and it's a piece of paper that will tell me that then I've developed professionally. But only going through the process, after the process is finished, they realize this has actually helped me. But right at the beginning, you need to do a lot of convincing of how this is actually going to be helpful for you beyond a piece of paper.
Okay. So it's a question also of the different contexts and the different cultures, institutional cultures, and cultures in general, right? How could you adapt exploratory action research to such different contexts and such different cultures?
I think one important thing is, if I'm talking as a teacher educator, I need to really listen to what the conversation is going with the teacher. And if there is a problem of them feeling insecure, there's a lot of building confidence about it doesn't matter if you're right or wrong, you're just discovering things. And if at the end you realize that, which is usually happening during the action phase at the end, in which they are trying to make sure that the action plan works. And then we need to assure them, if the action plan doesn't work, it doesn't matter. What matters is you're learning from that, why it didn't work and what are the things that you could do differently next time. So you need to be paying a lot of attention on where the issues could be, in terms there is a lot of issues with self-confidence and feeling that they have autonomy to make decisions. This is their research, is your topic, but is this topic interesting? It doesn't matter what I think. It matters what is valuable and useful to you. So listening to them, it's key. In different countries, I know there's different situations, but it usually has to do with because of the way they are trained. For example, in Thailand, which is kind of a culture where they need to follow certain rules, I noticed that for them to just be autonomous and making decisions is very difficult. So giving them permission to make decisions was something that I had to do a lot. But also, when you talk about adaptation, adapting my way of sharing the approach with teachers, looking for examples that they could relate to, it's crucial. Even though the approach may be one for all of them, there is still variations in terms of how the different examples of action research are being carried out depending on the context. So if you have examples from those different contexts or contexts that are similar, that helps. It gives them a sense. It's like a safety net. I have an example. Now I can follow that, even though you tell them not to copy it, but to use it as a kind of a guiding tool. It gives them a sense of safety.
Good, lovely. And talking about this question of finding and listening, right? What are the commonalities and what are the differences that you have observed among teachers from so many different backgrounds?
Well, the most evident one would be the issues that are addressed. I mean, the issues that they decide to explore. In Latin America, there is a lot of commonalities, which is so interesting. Because there are a lot of differences, but again, in terms of the challenges are very similar, and it's usually skills. A lot of that is related to speaking, maybe because, well, we know that we are kind of a very monolingual
continent.
Yeah, so continent and region, yeah.
Yeah, because it is very monolingual. There is this issue of lack of exposure. So because of lack of exposure, then my students are not writing properly, my students are not speaking properly. So there's a lot of that coming up. Issues of motivation come up a lot, usually in teenage groups. And then in other contexts, of course, the changes happen because of the curriculum. So in Africa, there was a lot of interest in literacy. And then in other countries, there's a lot of interest in issues of classroom management, especially in Africa, because they have massive classrooms of 100 students. So of course, those issues come up a lot. So it's interesting to see that depending on their reality, their classroom size, the curriculum, and what the curriculum wants to focus on are the challenges that starts arising. That is what I see as kind of the main either commonalities in Latin America and the main differences.
Great. And talking about things that are common or probably most commonly found, which impacts and outcomes have you found that are most common as regards exploratory action research in teachers, students, and schools?
In teachers, the main impact for sure is this this sensation of awareness raising. This is discovering something. I still remember a teacher from, where was he from? He was from Ethiopia, who he was looking at classroom management, and he said, my students were speaking all the time, but then when I paid attention to the kind of noise that they were producing, I realized that it was all productive noise. He used that term, productive noise. And if you think about it, we all kind of know that students talking is good noise and not always bad noise. But the fact that he discovered that and he gave it a name, it's so beautiful. So that was his like light bulb eureka moment. Like noise can actually be good. And I didn't tell him, nobody else told him, he figured it out. That's, I would say, is one of the most impactful things that I've noticed. Also, these teachers that I've talked to later on, they told me that something happens with them that then they are kind of in this research-based mindset. Like every time they are doing something, they start wondering, would this be this? Would this be that? Why don't I ask the students? Why don't I observe myself? Maybe why don't I do a little test? So they start becoming more evidence-based in their decision-making and in their thinking. That also happens. For students, one thing that teachers have mentioned a lot is that their relationship with their students improved, because the students start noticing that the teacher cares and they are having this conversation about you're asking me finally what I want and what are the activities that I prefer and what are my favorite stories to read about. So that relationship improves a great deal after the process. Motivations levels rise. The school, I haven't seen a lot of change there really, because in the very few schools that we have done the project, the most that we have seen it at least some kind of openness to teacher research being a way for teachers to develop and a way for the school to understand what is happening in the classroom. Mm-hmm. But I haven't seen that change to expand much. Again, this is always these situations where the bigger the institution, the more difficult the change to reach them in a way. Mm-hmm. So institutions are more difficult.
Yeah, I was thinking about the cultural context we mentioned a while ago, right? Okay, and to conclude with this part of the talk and to let my colleagues continue, what are some of the tools and strategies that you use that could support teachers in conducting exploratory action research?
Okay, this is what I am the most proud of, is that the more times I've done it, the more tools and strategies I have. So I was counting the number of programs that I have done, because every time I do a program, I do it differently. I was counting about 20 or something like that. So I've done things like this about 20 times. And the benefit of that is that you notice different things that help teachers in a different way. So now I have a lot of examples and framework. So I have, for example, a whole set of questions for an interview, and some with mistakes and some with ideas of what could be potentially improved, examples with surveys, examples of questions of surveys. I have developed a whole set of framework for teachers to do the analysis. I've realized that was a big challenge for teachers. In general, when you think about analysis, it's kind of a mental process, but when I was trying to think about how do I break it down into manageable pieces, in which is a process that has part 1, part 2, part 3, not analysis of I read and have an answer by tomorrow, but go easy on it, reduce data, try to see whether you can get answers from it. I also have developed frameworks for that, for them to go step by step in the analysis, ways in which they can finally reach their final question, examples of way to think about their action plan, always in connection with the initial issue. So frameworks for them to think logically, like this is your initial issue. This is what you found out. What is the action plan that you're going to implement that addresses the issue initially, but in connection to these findings? Mm-hmm. So I have a series now of examples of tools and frameworks that allow them to think more coherently in a way. And this is the result of many, many years doing it. So I owe all of that knowledge to all the hundreds of teachers that have worked with me over these years. They have been essential to show me the way to help them.
Great. And in that piece of advice, you have given another one. Keep track of everything you do. Keep a record of everything to do, because that is the secret, right?
Yes. Okay. Then you look at it again and you're like, oh, this may be difficult. We make it a little bit more teacher friendly or manageable for them or practical or whatever.
And that's when changes occur, right? When we think about all the the actions that we carry out in our teaching practices. Okay, good.
Well, thanks a lot.
Yeah, okay. And
over to you, Claudia.
Yeah,
Anna, unless you wanted to say something.
Food for thought. Anna?
You wanted to say something, Anna?
No, I was just saying lots of food for thought. Right?
Oh, yes, definitely. A banquet.
Exactly. Especially, I want to just pick out or focus on two concepts. Teacher agency, which is extremely, and contextualization, right? These are two concepts that we do not have to forget when we plan our classes, when we think of our students, right?
Yeah, and to think, but just to expand on that, is to think that teacher agency, we shouldn't take it for granted. Meaning that even when we are teaching the process of them to think for themselves and find answers for the questions, that teacher agency, if it's not developed in the context, then it's going to be difficult. So we need to help them feel that agency is there, but we need to help them along that process.
Okay. So, Claudia, your turn, Claudia.
Here I am. Well, it's such a pleasure to listen to you because you have this ability to make something that may look very, very, very complicated so simple, so teacher-friendly. And, listening to you and listening to the impact of exploratory action research all over the world, I would like to know, where do we go from here? What are your ideas, your future plans and aspirations? What are the current trends and challenges that you can see in the field?
I think that teacher research is becoming more and more part of the discussion, which is very good news. Is research, is action research, is exploratory practice, is practitioner research, is exploratory action research, is classroom research, is inquiry. There are a lot of different words and concepts that are helping or supporting teachers into doing this. This is good news. The more we talk about it, the more we are going to make it get established. It's important to continue to work together into demystifying what research is. I think that is difficult, but if we are all trying to help in that direction, that is going to be very helpful. I remember once they asked me to do a presentation about it, and I didn't know what to call it. And then I remember that I'm always trying to make, because you said that I try to make it practical. And this is something that I always, again, that research or teacher research is not sexy. So I call the presentation from a song, a pop song, teacher research, bringing sexy back. So there is a song that says I'm bringing sexy back. So it's trying to make research sexy, meaning practical, attractive, that is going to help you with your practice. I know we all like our recipes. I know we all like knowing how to do certain things, but that how to sometimes is in you. I mean, it's in your practice already. You know it. Sometimes
you don't know you know it. You don't
exactly. You don't know it's already there. Sometimes we try to find a new thing, and you don't need a new thing. You know what you have been doing already, but slightly differently. So there is this. What is happening now is that there is more opportunities for teachers to see that. So that teacher research is a valuable form of teacher research. However, I think, again, we are not reaching institutions at a bigger scale. It's still staying at the academia, universities, group of professional development groups, communities, teachers' communities. So I think there is still work to be done there. But if we can manage to get schools, at least, since you have mentioned schools before, to understand the value of teachers doing research in their classroom. And schools allow teachers to do it, allow it, encourage it, give it the time, support it. Something so nice as to say, let's say a teacher is saying, I'm going to do research in my classroom, I'm going to collect data about how my students are writing. And something so simple, start by, that's such a great idea. Why don't we do a meeting with teachers and you explain what you're going to do? Make the teacher feel good about that attempt to advance, to move forward. Start from there. There are things that need to happen later, like give them support, give them time, other types of support. But at least value their attempts. I still think that there is a lot that needs to be done to create communities among different teachers doing research. There are some that are working in isolation, that sometimes there is more than we working with them, or if themselves trying to connect with other people doing something similar. There is something that we have done at RISELT. Even though we do it, we want just to give the space for teachers to do research. For example, we have a conference that we do every 2 years, and in that conference there is a special space for teacher research. But sometimes they just don't know, they don't have the time, they're just too busy. So we just go out and look for them. We go out and look for them, and we give them a special space. And sometimes even they just don't know how to write an abstract for one of our conferences, but we don't care. We just ask them key questions. We create some kind of framework, like a writing frame of what is needed for them to. So just help a little, but just make sure that when there is a conference with a research focus, it's not all based on academic, university-based research, but there is also space for the research conducted by teachers at schools. And for that to happen, all of our small groups, communities, institutions need to start promoting it and providing space for that. And what is beautiful to watch is that then when you organize the event, you see well-known academics or researchers attending and listening to a teacher research, sharing about their research experiences. And so that helps also bridge a little bit of the gap between them too.
Do you feel that there is resistance in policymakers, supervisors, heads, principals? Or they don't know about it?
I do, but I think that that resistance comes from the need to see immediate results here and now. So let me know how this is going to improve a student's learning now. And anything that you do for professional development, and we all know that teacher change, because this is teacher learning, teacher change, takes time. So the more opportunities they have to collect data about their classroom, to understand how it is that they are teaching, and to understand themselves as teachers, the more opportunities they have to change and grow. But then the changes into practice take time, and then those changes will turn into improvement in learning. However, there is still this idea, and maybe you have all experienced this, in which I'm giving this, please give these teachers this course in August, and in September I expect to see improvement in learning. It doesn't work that way. Human beings do not work that way. We are not machines. So the reason why sometimes is resistance, because what is the improvement in learning? And, to be fair and to be critical of that view, a lot of the things that they do that they think has improvement in students' learning doesn't have improvement in learning in any way. And we already know from research that the teacher is a key factor in any process of learning. And the self-awareness of teachers about what they are doing, we also know it's a key factor. Anything that makes them aware of what they're doing and in which they're understanding the decisions that they're taking, it's also going to have an impact in learning. But it's not going to be next month. So the resistance comes from this need for immediacy. It needs to happen tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Well, I'm sure Oscar has great questions. He was in charge of developing the model on action research, so he knows a lot about it.
Well, well, first of all, it's a pleasure. It's a real pleasure, Paula, yes, to share this space with you. Of course, yes, we prepared everything together, but today we are learning much more, surely.
Oh, that's great.
Well, Paula, you have spoken about your experiences. You have spoken about all the teachers and what teachers are doing, yes, in different parts of the world. Probably you have answered all the questions, yes, that we had in mind. And because you are very clear and you have answered, yes, a lot of things that we were thinking of. We have also, yes, I'm thinking about the book because we have a very interesting reference in the handbook of champion teachers in Chile. And this is about the question I'm going to ask you. Because you mentioned that there are similarities, especially in Latin American countries, as regards probably teaching situations and teaching contexts. So considering your experience in Chile and other countries in Latin America, so the question is, what are the tips? What are the recommendations? What kinds of suggestions can you provide, especially for our Latin American context, and if possible, yes, for our particular context in Argentina? We need tips. Yes, we need to know, yes, what we can do, especially, yes, for our course.
Okay. I think you teachers in Argentina, and this is where I'm going to give you, when I'm going to praise you. Teachers in Argentina, teacher education in Argentina has done a very good job in promoting reflection and critical thinking. This is what I've noticed by working with teachers in Argentina, compared to other neighboring countries. And this is when I see maybe that lacking a little bit in Chile. Maybe now it's improving, but in Argentina, I see a lot of work done in promoting teachers to reflect and be critical about themselves, about what they're doing in the classroom, especially in teacher education programs. So I think you have there a good opportunity of moving forward in that sense. However, we in Latin America still have this tendency to always expect to be told what to do. This is kind of a very Latin American thing, and also in Asian countries happens a lot. So even though in Argentina I see a lot of reflection, great reflection from different teachers that I've worked with, there is still this need from them to be told what to do, especially when they are at the analysis stage. Let me go little by little. At the beginning, when you start thinking about your topic, a very common mistake that teachers make, if I could just suggest tips of how to avoid it, is that usually teachers try to think that in a question, they are going to solve a world's problem. And I can relate to that because this is part of what we do. We want to help the students. We want to build a better society, but sometimes in a classroom-based research that is so practical, is very it's very small in scale. We want to solve everything. So the first suggestion is to ask them to think about building, this is something that I remember my PhD supervisor told me, with a PhD, you need to fill a gap in knowledge. You need to discover or find out something that nobody else has found before. And sometimes teacher researchers think they need to do the same. And so they get too ambitious. And here, teacher research is about filling a gap in their own knowledge. There is something that it may be evident for everybody else, but it's not evident to you, and there is value in that. So just avoiding the mistake of trying too much, of trying to solve everything. So think of a situation that is manageable for your classroom situations. And that is something that mistakes that teacher educators make as well, because we are forcing them to think of something more interesting or more innovative or something. And actually, it doesn't matter what I think. If there is something that appears very obvious to me, but you don't know, it's valuable because it's about you and your knowledge as a teacher about your classroom situation. So that's step one. Then when they are in the process of collecting data, is again trusting the methods that they're designing, getting a lot of help, using critical peers to design these tools, and avoid thinking that trying to collect data for everything, but just limiting to your questions and value what you get from there. In the analysis part, it's all about going step by step. Do not rush. Going step by step, helping teachers go easy in the process. And I don't know, maybe because we are Latin Americans, we like to do everything fast. Sometimes they think that I'm going to look at the data in an hour and I'm going to have the answer.
This is probably the main feature, yes, we share. We want to solve everything, yes, in a moment.
We want to solve everything, and we want to solve everything and fast.
Yes.
That's it.
Paula, but we are very glad to hear, yes, that we are very reflective, or at least the teachers, yes, promote reflection. So this is something good for us.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that there is a lot of reflection going on there makes the process easier, because there is already the desire to be critical and to be reflective. It's different that if a teacher lacks that confidence of that exercise of reflecting, it's very difficult for them to look at themselves, because teacher research is also like a mirror.
Yes.
And sometimes you don't like what you see. So you need to have had the training of having looked at yourself in the mirror to not feel afraid of it or not feeling anxious about it. And based on my experience working with Argentinian teachers, which I've worked with them in many different opportunities, I don't see that being often. Are you there? Have the impression that I have frozen.
We are here. We are here.
Okay, good. You disappear for a minute. I'm like, what did I do?
And you listen to us.
Yes. I was speaking when I just saw you leaving.
Okay.
I don't know. Has that given you tips or maybe answered your question?
No. It's very clear, yes, and it is very interesting for us, at least to start thinking about the starting point in the process of exploratory action research. Thank you, Paula.
And give them examples, please. Give them examples. I've noticed that the more examples they have, the easier the process is, the more they relax into it, because again, research is a daunting word. So what we want them is to feel that it doesn't have to be daunting. It doesn't have to be so challenging. It doesn't have to be hard. But if they see that other people, she did it, he did it, and this is an example, then so can I.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Paula. There are some questions right in the chat box, and some of the questions are also related to the questions our colleagues wrote during the module, right? During the course, right? Yeah. So I don't know, Paul, have you collected the questions? Because I do have some here.
I have like 4 big groups of questions. So probably
okay, perfect. Would you like to ask?
Right?
Would you like to read them?
The first question has to do. It's by Claudia, and she asks, starting exploratory action research, especially the question to start, is not easy, and she wants a piece of advice on that.
There are 2 ways that Richard and I have suggested teachers to start with their question. One is what we call the inductive approach, and one is what we call the deductive approach. In the inductive approach, you're basically talking to a colleague, and you're explaining to your colleague, I have this situation, and I'm trying to understand it further. And so that colleague, in that conversation, your colleague is going to ask you questions, such as, when does it happen? Does it happen regularly? Have you noticed this happen in every class? And ideally, you should take notes of those questions, because those questions could become the exploratory questions that you use later for your research. Because for some of those questions, you are going to have answers, and some of them are going to be half answers, they're more going to be guesses, and in others, you won't have any answers at all for a fact, like actual evidence. So that conversation, which is kind of a Socratic, dialogue, keep those questions because they can become your exploratory questions. Another way, which we call the deductive approach, is we have suggested what we call the exploratory question frame, in which we suggest teachers to think about perceptions, thinking about asking questions about their own behavior, their own perceptions, but also the perceptions and behaviors of others. And we have given frames for those questions, like, when does something happen? What does my student or my colleague think about that? And so you can use those questions to create a list. And then from that list, start looking at what are the questions that actually are getting to what I want to know.
Okay, good. Now, the second group of questions has to do with doing research and teaching time. Claudia also says that we are usually taught to do action research during the practicum period, but then we have very, very short time to carry it out during the classroom. And then Maria Eva asks, how can you carry out action research without disrupting teaching? That is, probably we have a clash here between the teaching time and research time, or not?
It could be a clash if you're exploring something from a part of the curriculum that is something you already covered. That could potentially be an issue. So this is something that I also suggest to teachers. Try not to create that tension. Try to make sure that it's helping your teaching. Try to select something that connects with what you're doing right now. And then when they are doing their tools, for example, I suggest that maybe they can use their tools as teaching materials as well, kind of as worksheets as well. So if the survey is asking about questions, what kind of activities they like, maybe use words that they have been practicing, so that in a way it's also practicing language in a way. So it kind of becomes worksheet and data collection if possible. I know that that is not always possible when you are doing interviews and you need to take the students outside. But if you do it like an open classroom discussion, and you use very simple language, it can actually become a classroom activity rather than a moment outside of my class taking me away from what my planning is doing. So that is, I can understand the challenge of that, but if you play with that and also get the help from colleagues to give you ideas, I think that's something that could solve that issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Just another question. I am synthesizing 2 questions into one. Rafaela and Agustina talk about these 2 factors. Agustina says, what do you think can be done to encourage teacher research at institutional level? And Rafaela's question is, if EAR can be applied when the topic is students' behavior. So I think that probably these two can be together or not. You tell me.
If there is an issue in connection with the student's behavior, even though it's teacher research, there are a lot of things that you can do about what is at the source of that behavior. So if you want to find out what is causing a student's misbehavior, for example, and you try to collect data, it's great to know why this is happening. Is this just that they want to be mean to me? Or actually there is more there. It has to do with the timings of the classes. It has to do with whether it's early, whether it's late in the day, whether there's something that I'm not doing or not to manage that discipline very well. So by learning what is happening, it's going to allow you to address it better. There is a number of examples of teachers that have researched that in groups with me, and they have come to an action plan involving a contract, for example, in which students were not aware that they were misbehaving. That was the key takeaway. And then as a result of that, she did a whole lesson about that. And then she asked them to sign a class contract that they would agree on, that there would be people assigning roles to check behavior. So it is possible. And then the other question was?
It was about how to encourage the teacher research at institutional level.
Yeah, you know what about that? I have seen a couple of examples in which schools have reacted very well when, for example, a teacher, either from the school or either from another school, goes into a teacher's meeting and explains, this is what I did. It's actually not that difficult. It only took me this amount of time, but this is what I discovered, and this is what I benefited. These are the benefits that I found from it. So I was able to understand about myself. I was able to create better classes. My strategies are more linked with what my students need and want. And if the whole institution hears that could be the potential benefit, that could be promoted. However, there is always the support needed there about who is going to mentor those teachers in that given institution. So that's why the more support they would have to carry it out, the better.
Good. And the final question is a little bit more like marketing or probably commercial, because somebody wants to know, Veronica wants to know, where your research is available. Where can we find your research or the results of your research, your publications, and all that?
I'm mainly interested in sharing the research of teachers. So I have a number of the handbook is one, and I have a number of publications from teachers where I share their stories. Richard and I recently wrote a publication for another British Council publications in which we talk about suggestions for policymakers and how to embed exploratory action research as professional development. We did that recently as well. And all the rest is stories from teachers. So what I do is after I finish the projects, I try to make sure that they are written in language that is accessible for others, for teachers from an international audience, and they are there for people to read about. I recently finished the second, it's not out yet, but I finished the second edition of the stories from teachers in Africa. The first one is already out. It's in one of the British Council websites. Everything is probably in Teaching English, and that is because they are connected to programs. But I know there are many more. The Hornby group has already put up a lot of publications out there of teacher research examples, so they are easily accessible. That is one thing that is important. All of these examples are accessible online. And if I can make another bit of publicity or marketing, because I think that is really important, if you would like teachers to also have access to research carried out by teachers, but that has been published in a peer-reviewed journal, I always recommend people to go to local journals. You have the Agile journal, and Profile is one of my favorite journals to go to as well. It shows very clearly and how from one example of teacher research, you could actually end up with a peer-reviewed publication. Again, that is not our goal, but if you want to see how incrementally you can get there, that is one way also to show that.
Thank you very much. I think that the answer has been completely satisfying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we are just finishing, right? Just some minutes after 7. We promised not to have a very long chat, and it was really very, very interesting. And as I said before, lots of food for thought, especially to see how exploratory action research it's an initiative of teacher empowerment, right? As you said, Paula, to enhance this professional growth, autonomy, right? You mentioned that several times, the idea of autonomy, of teacher agency, and this decision-making power, right, of educators. I think that this is where we need to go. As we can see, exploratory action research aim to give teachers the necessary skills, knowledge, and resources to improve their teaching practices, the daily and everyday practices, and have a positive impact in students' learning. And something else that I would like to focus on or highlight is the idea of the slow learning, right? When you were talking about this idea of we want everything to occur, to happen now and fast. It's like fast food, right? And we need to the opposite. Is slow learning that kind of provokes deep learning, right? And so we need time. We need time as teachers, and we need time to give our students time to internalize, to incorporate changes and what we want to happen. So, Paula, no more words, right? I hope to see you here in Argentina, right, face to face.
Me too.
So you are invited, right, for whenever you can come here. And again, thank you. Thank you very much for all your expertise.
You are very welcome. Thank you very much for the invitation. You know that Argentina is very close to me. I have very, very good friends from Argentina. So it's a pleasure for me to help in any way I can. If there are questions that come later that you would like me to address, let me know. This is more than a job. This is a passion for me. I really love talking about it. I love helping anybody that would like to learn more about it, helping teachers, making it a reality, or helping institutions. So if there's any way that I could help,
And there are very, very, very nice comments in the chat box also here. Lots of thanks, and well, people are very, very happy with you.
Okay.
Talk, really.
Thank you.
Thank you for thank you for your generosity in sharing your experience and everything you know.
You're welcome.
Okay.
You have been very
hopefully.
clear. Okay. It's a pleasure.
Hopefully, see you soon. Hopefully.
Okay, let's hope that. Let's hope so.
May it be so.
People, and thank you for all the colleagues who attended this meeting, right, and who participated through the chat box. So thank you very much for being here.